Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Mark's English History Channel. Here, filmed on the ground here in and around the Belgian town of Ypres, which was a pivotal juncture of the British and Commonwealth or Imperial Forces activity during the First World War, or otherwise known as the Great War. And we're up in a village, up at the northern sector of the Ypres Salient. If you've watched my earlier episode on the Essex Farm John McCrae site, as it explains the layout of the Ypres Salient. So we're up on the northern tip of the Salient, an area called Boesinghe. And if you actually look around, we are in a industrial estate. However, when they were building this industrial estate, they came across a very important archaeological find, and that's what we're going to head up into here. And this is a preserved First World War trench and deep dugout. Now, unfortunately, due to the weather conditions, it is late February that I'm here, that we've had in this area of Belgium over the last few months. The deep dugout itself is flooded out. I will show you it in a moment. However, as we stand here, what we are looking at on the ground is a rough layout of the dugout, and if we come up to here, you can see that an artist has created a visual representation. So you've got your trench system here, as you can see here. So I'm just going to try and point it out, looking at this and looking at the ground for the moment before we actually go down into the trench system. So originally there was a more basic trench system built by members of the Irish Brigade in 1915, and that's this small line of trench indentation you can see running through the ground here. Now, standing above it, looking at it like this, what you can really see is the shape of it. So we're not looking at a straight line that sort of most people conjure up in their minds of a trench, but you're looking at the indentation, the zigzag approach of a trench, the creation of fire bays towards the front, reserve bays to the side. Now, the reason why it was those trenches were dug like that was if a shell was to directly hit, or if enemy forces were to penetrate, they didn't have a free reign of fire down the entire trench. That action or that shell explosion would be confined to a smallish area of the trench and thus not take out an entire wave of it. But that, you can see, is quite good. Later on, in 1917, the Yorkshire Trench, which is what this is known as, is built, and that's the preserved trench slightly to the back and the deep dugout that you can see here. So you can see it's got two stairways. Now, just to orientate ourselves, the Germans are in that direction, and so all the dugouts were always built under no man's land. So the wire would have been running across here, as you can see here, and the dugouts were built in no man's land. The reason being, if you've got a stairway coming back towards the enemy, a shell coming that way can't pitch straight down your stairwell and explode down inside the deep dugout, causing mass casualties. It would have to sort of ricochet around a bit for it to get down there. So the idea is to try to protect the dugout as much as possible. Okay, so you've got two stairwells coming down. So you've got one just down here, and you've got one at the far end, just in front of where the muddy patch is as it leads around the other side, at the other side of the trench there. And then down inside, you've got a couple of pump rooms. So you've got one here, again one at the other end, which we'll go around and have a look at in a moment once we've been down and had a look inside the trench. You've got a carpenter's room here. And then all along this back side, so where the path leads up along, again we'll go and have a look, you've got various little bunk rooms coming off, and then at the far end, just near where those pallets are in the industrial yard, you've got the command post. Okay, so that's a rough layout of this area of the trench. So let's have a walk down here, and we'll go down into the trench and have a look. So like I say, here you can see that line of that original 1915 trench. So this is how, when you come to a First World War battlefields, a lot of the places, this is sort of what remains of the trenches. Not very much slight indentation in the ground. However, when they were building this area, this was discovered beneath the soil. Obviously this has been semi-reconstructed, so the concrete sandbags, for example, that are revetting the structure now, the duck boards that are down underneath this mud are all modern, but originals were found down here. The water level in this area of Flanders, the water table, is very low. As a result, you can get flooding occurs, and that's what actually protected it. As you can see here, you've actually got non-concrete sandbag. So here's the entrance to one of the dugouts, and as I say, very high flood water levels already. There is no chance whatsoever of getting in there at all at the moment, not unless you've got diving gear. Again, you can see from the height, some form of height here, that a trench would be. It does come up here again. Like I say, this is a redug or an excavated trench line. You've got areas back here. Okay, so we'll come up as far as here because it's a big drop down into this next section of the trench which we can't get down, but you can see there the sort of these A-frames structures you can see here. They original versions were found when they excavated this trench, and again the duck boards there as well to try to keep the soldiers out of the mud as much as possible. You can see from the trench in front of us, the original 1915 trench, just how flooded this area does become. Behind us, the tubes, the pipes, they are leavings projector pipes. So a type of trench mortar that will be able to throw mortars, gas shells out towards the German lines over in that direction. It doesn't say here how far away the Germans were, and you can see the rest of the trench going round. So like I say, you can't jump, don't really want to jump down there because it's not it's quite a big drop into that part of the trench. But if we come back round, you can see here we've got a lookout post and sniper position. So the metal position there, and then through there you can see, and you can fire. It probably might have had a little shutter on, but it would have given the soldier at this position, this lookout point, sniping position, a bit of protection. Weapon can go through, can sight through it, and if he sees any movement across there, he's got his shot. Okay, so the deep dugout here is 10 metres deep. Okay, so quite a long way down. Like I say, unfortunately it is flooded, so there's no possibility of getting any further towards there at present. So as we come back up here, we're going to have a look around as we can't get into the dugout, we'll go and have a look at the footprint on the surface. Like I say, if you remember the picture that I showed you earlier, as we move around here, and you'll get an idea of the position of the dugout. Now, it seems a common misconception. We always talk about the Germans having deep dugouts, the British had them too. Our ones were mainly wood though, where theirs were concrete. And that demonstrates the difference between how the two armies fought, or not fought, how the two armies considered trench warfare. So the area that we're standing in at the moment, this little space, is the first pump room. So needed the pump room to pump the water out to stop it flooding. As soon, it says there on the information board, as soon as the British troops advanced in 1917 and left this position unmanned, it started to flood in because it needed continuous work to keep the water level down. Carpenter's workshop here, as you said, storage rooms were back here. Back here is a storage space. And then as we come along sort of the main corridor here, as I say, we're walking directly on top of it, you've got bunk rooms to the left and to the right, areas for the men stationed in this part of the trench could sleep and shelter. So more bunk rooms off on either side here. Little giveaway point, I would imagine. Again, another bunk room there. So probably only a couple of bunks per room. A second pump room back here to operate from this part of the trench. And then down into here for a command post, officer's position. So possibly one of these, definitely one of those bunk rooms would have been the officer's mess. As we come up here, we're now heading back again across the line of the original 1915 trench that would be later expanded, consolidated, deepened. So the 1915 trench, obviously this would have been area around which the Second Battle of Ypres was fought. Early trench system, just enough to give you some shelter. Later on in the war, as the trench warfare really developed, deeper, more protected areas were built, such as, like we say, the German heavy defenders, especially in the 1917, the Hindenburg line. And that's what I was talking about so we'll just drop down into this part of the trench and I'll explain the difference between how both the British and the French and the Germans considered trench warfare. So again, here is another entrance to those dugouts, but again flooded at present, unable to access. As you come round here, again you can see just how high it is. Another loophole in which you could safely protect yourself, view what's going on and fire at the same time. German snipers will be looking at this, looking for any kind of sign of movement. Okay, and then as we come around here again, you can see the zigzagging nature of the trench. Your fire bay, your clear fire bay there, more reserved area here, out into another fire bay here with Mr. Pigeon. And then another fire bay going along there, meeting up to the point that I said about jumping down. Now, as we move back around to come out of the trench, let's discuss how those different nations consider trench warfare. Now, what we need to remember is the German Imperial Army at this point is occupying enemy territory. They're in Belgium and they're in France. So that in effect, what they do is they create a fortified western border. Now, to understand this, we need to go right back to the outbreak of the First World War and why the Germans are even here in the first place. So as hopefully you know, the war began due to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo in July 1914. An alliance system was previously in place. It's very complicated to go into the whole details of it now. However, Germany at the outbreak of war was facing a war on two fronts, facing the French in the west and the Russians in the east. So in 1905, in anticipation for this, a German General von Schlieffen, drew up what was known as the Schlieffen Plan. Now this was a rapid movement against France through neutral Belgium, anticipating the Belgians wouldn't stand in their way, for an attack to be laid against the French, take Paris before being able to move against the Russians, who they anticipated would take a long time to mobilise their forces. However, that did not really occur. A number of things happened. Belgium stood in their way, Britain came to Belgium's aid, and the Russians were ready beforehand. So they were now fighting a war on two fronts. They realised they couldn't do this, so what they decided to do was to realistically fortify the western border against the Western Allies, hopefully knock Russia out of the war before concentrating their attack on the Western Allies. The British and the French, on the other hand, decided that the trenches were best used as a way to protect their men in anticipation for an assault. So whilst the Germans were heavily defending their positions, deep trenches, deep concrete bunkers, the British and the French were using more more light trench systems, such as the one we see here in the early 1915 trench. Only later on in the war, as especially up in this sector in Flanders becomes a lot more static, the British tended to dig in and create those deeper, more protected positions. So that's a brief overview of trench warfare. If you watch, I will try to put out some more videos, some more ones, maybe not from the sites, but certainly at home, that can show you and then have more actual pictures from the time of the various trenches, to get more of an understanding of that. Okay, I might even put some on the end of this video, but that is a brief overview of the area that's known of the Yorkshire Trench and deep dugout here in Boesinghe. It's the first time I've actually visited it, and I was rather impressed with the site. I must admit, I would like to come back in the height of summer when hopefully it isn't as flooded and you can get down there. But no, very, very interesting site, very worth a visit if you are over here. Unfortunately, it is a bit out of the way, and the parking here isn't great, which is probably why I've never been here before, because I've normally come, the only other times I've come to Ypres is when I've been on coach visits, and there is not a possibility of getting a coach in here, so that's probably why they've not been here before. But no, definitely worth a visit if you're over this way.